The hide crush, also called shiri, was used by steppe tribes in Mongolia and Kyrgyzstan. A raw camel hide was stretched over the victim's shaved head, then they were tied down and abandoned in the sun. As the hide dried, it shrank tightly around the skull, causing severe pressure, fractured bones and restricted breathing, often leading to a slow death from suffocation or trauma. Survivors suffered amnesia, and the process forced hair to grow inward. The Scavenger's Daughter was a punishment device from the reign of Henry VIII kept in the Tower of London. It was an iron A-frame that bound the victim's head to the top, hands to the middle and legs to the bottom. The frame could then fold inward, crushing the body into a crouched position. This extreme compression forced blood to burst from the nose, ears and sometimes under the skin, causing intense pain and potential suffocation or lasting injury. The Schwedentrunk was a method used in Central Europe, especially Germany and Bohemia, during the 30 Years' War. Victims were forced to drink large amounts of foul liquids like sewage, urine or manure, causing vomiting, extreme pain and humiliation. The name came from German civilians who suffered at the hands of Swedish troops. It was used to extort townspeople for money, food or livestock. The tiger bench is a method used in China from the 1990s to the present, especially in political detention centers and labor camps. Victims are seated with legs straight, knees pressed against a hard edge and bound tightly. Bricks or weights are then placed under the feet, hyperextending the joints and causing severe pain, often leading to broken knees or feet. It has been used to punish dissidents, including Falun Gong practitioners. Judas Cradle was a device used during the Spanish Inquisition. It consisted of a pyramid-shaped seat with a sharp tip, on which victims were placed so their body weight pressed down, causing slow, excruciating penetration of the lower body. Torturers sometimes added weights to increase pressure, stretching the body unnaturally and accelerating tissue damage. Oil or grease was occasionally applied to make the body slide further onto the tip. The device caused torn muscles, bruised organs, damaged blood vessels, internal bleeding and infections, and was designed to inflict prolonged agonizing pain. Standing cells were punishment chambers used in Nazi concentration camps like Auschwitz and Dachau, as well as earlier in 19th century Prussian prisons. Often no more than 2 feet, 60 centimeters wide, they forced prisoners to remain standing for days without rest. The lack of movement caused swelling, muscle breakdown, extreme exhaustion, hallucinations, and psychological collapse. The Pear of Anguish was a medieval metal device used especially in France and Germany for those accused of blasphemy or witchcraft. It could be inserted into the mouth, throat, rear or female private parts, and then expanded by a screw, tearing tissue, causing severe bleeding, infections, and permanent disfigurement. The lead sprinkler was a rare medieval suffering device shaped like a metal rod with a bulb on the end. The bulb could be opened, filled with molten lead, boiling oil, water, pitch or tar, and then sealed with a perforated lid. When shaken, the hot liquid dripped through the holes onto the victim who was restrained in place. The method caused random burns across the whole body, and the slow, unpredictable drops added psychological torment. It was mainly used between the 15th and 17th centuries, especially in Spain, Italy and Germany during the Inquisition against heretics and rebels. The rack was a medieval restraint device, built as a large bed-like frame with rollers at each end. The victim's wrists and ankles were tied to ropes bound around the rollers, and as they were slowly turned, the body was stretched in opposite directions. This dislocated joints, tore ligaments and muscles, and could cause lasting disabilities or death from shock and internal injuries. Its purpose was to inflict unbearable pain, often to force confessions or extract information during the Inquisition. Many victims confessed to false charges just to make the torment stop. The Crocodile Shears were an instrument in late medieval Europe, mainly reserved for those who tried to take down a king. They were iron pincers ending in 2 half-cylindrical jaws, lined with sharp spikes. Heated until red hot, the device was clamped onto the victim's erect sensitive body parts, tearing them away under tension or causing catastrophic bleeding. The Heretic's fork was a punishment method used mainly during the Spanish Inquisition. It was a metal rod with sharp prongs at both ends strapped to the victim's neck, so one set pressed under the chin and the other into the chest. This prevented the victim from speaking or lowering their head, causing extreme pain as the prongs gradually pierced the neck or jaw. It was used to punish or force confessions from those accused of heresy. Lower tract feeding is a coercion method used in medieval Europe and the Guantanamo Bay detention camp, where food or liquid is forced into the booty. It causes intense pain, risk of infection and internal damage, while also serving as a degrading act. It has been used on hunger strikers to break their resistance and force compliance. The Tucker telephone was a punishment device used in the 1950s and 60s at Tucker Prison Farm in Arkansas. It was made from a hand-cranked telephone with electrodes attached to a prisoner's genitals or toes. When the crank was turned, it delivered intense electric shocks designed to maximize pain without causing death. The Castor Oil Purge. In fascist Italy under Benito Mussolini, political opponents, dissidents and communists were forcibly administered large quantities of castor oil, often a bottle or more, in public to induce severe diarrhea, causing pain, dehydration and humiliation, often paired with beatings. This was also used in colonial Africa and South Asia as a punishment for workers feigning illness. The Spanish boot was a medieval device used across Europe that encased the leg and foot in iron or wood. Wedges were then hammered into the space between the casing and flesh, crushing bone and muscle. A related version, the shin crusher, clamped the calf between spiked or studded iron plates to shatter the tibia and fibula. Pressure was steadily increased until the victim confessed or passed out, often leaving permanent maiming. Glasstration was allegedly an ancient brutal punishment. A glass rod was inserted into the urethra of an erect Johnson. Then the organ was smashed with a hammer. The rod shattered inside, leaving sharp fragments embedded throughout the tissue, causing unbearable pain, massive internal injury and often death. It was used as punishment for sexual assault. The garrote was a device used in Spain and Portugal during the Middle Ages, often used in interrogations to choke non-lethally. It consisted of a metal collar or wire that was tightened around the victim's neck, either strangling them or sometimes breaking the spine. The Chinese drip punishment, despite its name, did not originate in China, but was first recorded in Italy in the late 15th century. The victim was restrained while cold water dripped slowly onto the scalp or face. The irregular drops created anxiety, fear, and mental breakdown over time, as the victim could not anticipate when the next drop would fall. Prolonged exposure led to lasting psychological damage, including psychosis. The Spanish tickler or flesh rake was used across Europe during the Middle Ages and the Spanish Inquisition. It was a claw-like iron tool about the size of a hand attached to a handle and used to tear flesh from areas like the face, chest or limbs. To comply with Inquisition rules against spilling blood, the device was often heated red hot, burning as it shredded skin. Victims were usually suspended or stretched on a rack. While many did not die immediately, severe infections from the wounds often proved fatal. The Spanish horse was used in the 14th to 18th century Spain and England, often for those deemed witches. It forced restrained victims to straddle a wooden triangular structure with a sharp-edged top with weights tied to their legs. The added weight increased pressure on the crotch, causing severe pain and eventually slicing into the flesh, often leaving victims crippled or fatally injured. Bamboo piercing involved restraining victims over bamboo shoots or saplings. Due to bamboo's rapid growth, some species grow as fast as 4 centimeters per hour, the plant would eventually pierce the victim's body. Some accounts describe sharpened bamboo tied to Allied prisoners by Imperial Japanese soldiers, with the shoots gradually penetrating flesh as they grew, though historical evidence is limited on this. Reports suggest this method was allegedly used in China, India and Japan, but reliable documentation is scarce. The iron chair was a device used during the Middle Ages right up until the 19th century. Its spikes were designed to pierce the flesh, but not deep enough to cause death. The prisoner would be strapped tighter each time, causing more wounding. There is a hole in the seat under which hot coals would be burned in order to roast the prisoner from beneath. The purpose was to extract confessions from individuals accused of heresy or witchcraft. The Oubliette was a medieval dungeon chamber used in French and English castles. It was a narrow, lightless pit, often shaped like a wine bottle with a single trapdoor at the top. Prisoners were thrown inside and left with no hope of escape, but kept alive. Most of these pits were too small to stand in and full of filth, rats and past victims. Some oubliettes had spiked floors that mutilated limbs or were flooded to create panic. The breast ripper was an iron device designed to take off the chest tissue of women accused of adultery, witchcraft or abortion, reportedly used in 16th century France and Germany. Punishing shoes were iron shoes that had sharp spikes in the heel area, used in 15th century Germany. Victims were forced to stand on tiptoe to avoid impalement, but over time fatigue would cause them to collapse backward, impaling their heels on the spikes. Extended exposure could lead to severe injury or death due to blood loss. White torture is an extreme form of sensory deprivation where everything a prisoner encounters, cell, clothes, food, guards, is entirely white. Lights remain on constantly, no words are spoken and the prisoner sees no color. Documented in Iran in 2004, the method causes severe psychological damage including memory loss and lasting mental trauma. Waterboarding is a method where a victim lies on an inclined platform with feet elevated while water is poured into the nose and mouth. This floods the sinuses and triggers the gag reflex, making it impossible to breathe without aspirating water, creating the sensation of drowning. The victim's mouth and nose are often covered with cloth or cellophane to trap water. After brief intervals to revive the victim, the process may be repeated. Waterboarding causes extreme physical pain, panic, and terror within seconds. It has been used for centuries, including by the Spanish Inquisition, Dutch traders, US forces in the Philippines, the Japanese army in World War II, and the Khmer Rouge. It was outlawed under the 1929 Third Geneva Convention. Jiagun was a Chinese punishment device made of 3 wooden boards connected by cords. Placed around a suspect's feet, the cords were gradually tightened and struck with a mallet, causing extreme pain and often breaking the ankles. It was used as a legal, non-lethal method to force confessions from men. Mancuerda was an Inquisition-era method in which a tight cord was wound around a victim's arms. The executioner applied pressure by throwing his weight backward or using a lever, cutting through skin and muscle to the bone. The procedure was repeated multiple times on different parts of the arms. Victims often fainted from the pain. Pitchcapping involved pouring hot pitch or tar into a conical paper cap and putting it onto the victim's head. Once the pitch cooled, the cap was ripped off, tearing away skin and tissue from the scalp and leaving permanent scars. Deadly infections following the procedure were common. This method dates back to classical antiquity, but was used most prominently during the suppression of the Irish Rebellion of 1798. The Whirligig was a military punishment used in 17th to 18th century England and its colonies. It consisted of a 6-foot-high cylindrical cage suspended on pivots. The victim was placed inside and the cage was spun violently, causing severe nausea, disorientation and psychological distress. Ear cropping involved the partial or complete removal of an enslaved person's ear with a blade or shears as a punishment for escape attempts or repeated defiance. It was designed to mark the individual permanently and deter further resistance. This practice was common on plantations in the American South, including South Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee from the 17th century through the antebellum period. The knee splitter was a device used during the Inquisition designed to destroy a victim's knees. It consisted of 2 spiked wooden blocks placed above and below the knee, connected by large screws. As the screws were turned, the blocks closed together, splitting and crushing the knee. The device could also be applied to other body parts, such as the arms, to inflict similar damage.